It is and always will be a tradition here at the Academy for leading representatives of each class to address the Assembly in the graduation ceremony. The teachers have selected 2 graduates to speak on behalf of the seniors. Students who stand as both a model of intellectual excellence and a model of character. Both of tonight's young men have embraced their time here and excelled in every aspect of the Academy's liberal arts curriculum and in extracurricular activities. So, to begin, I would like to invite, actually I'll just start by announcing Mr. Noah Wuerfel, co-valedictorian, who will be speaking to this assembly. Noah is an academic All-American, accomplished in a range of areas, and is preparing to be a freshman next year at Harvard. I am very honored to introduce a man who stands as the embodiment of the integrity and intellect of the class of 2013, Mr. Noah Wuerfel.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks. Before I begin, I would like to give a very abridged and brief list of people I'd like to thank. First, I'd like to thank my family, the Quinville family, the Newburgers, Ms. Holzenbeck, Mr. Orletsky, Mr. Myers, Mr. Lindquist, Ms. Hesse, and Joel Guy, for teaching me not what to care about, but that I should care. Tonight, I would like to take a moment away from the obvious reason that everybody is here. And I'd like to talk about bows. Well, it will soon become apparent what my purpose is. I don't want to make it too immediate. I would like everyone to figure it out as it progresses. The bow is a weapon predating recorded history. It fires a projectile we call an arrow, and it is a beautiful demonstration of potential energy in the form of tension. While the bow has unfortunately become largely obsolete with the invention of gunpowder, for tens of millennia, humankind has attempted to perfect the art of firing the bow, that thing which we call archery. It is no surprise then the significant influence the bow has had on all cultures, particularly our Western. Mr. Myers tells me that there's an etymological relationship between our words bow and life, stemming from the Greek word bios. And while I cannot take Greek, and thus I cannot confirm this, I tend to think that Mr. Myers is fairly trustworthy in these issues. Mastering archery requires a lifetime of commitment. Drawing a bow requires great strength. Holding it long enough to aim requires endurance. Waiting for a target requires patience. And once one finally releases their arrow, follow through and conviction are required to ensure it leaves the bow on its desired path. It has been said that the Persians had 2 virtues. The first is to tell the truth, and the second is to fire the bow well. But when we consider that firing a bow entails strength, endurance, patience, and conviction, the Persian virtues are not so far from those which we would attribute to a good student. In this sense, while archery is falling out of practice, it is not so different from studentry. Our class's motto is, knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. Taking a course we go to. In other words, the drawing a bow without the intent to fire it stresses not only the bow, but its user. Yet, Humane Hunters class involves a great deal of talking rather than doing. It would seem there's a contradiction between our educational philosophy and our class motto. But I think that the 280th aphorism of Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil provides us a very good way to resolve these 2 problems. Notably, he says that his philosophical individual steps back from a problem just like someone who is about to attempt to be a great jumper. This image too fits well with our archery education. One pulls the arrow away from its target before exploding outwards. So too ought we to step back to contemplate for the sake of an explosive jump. But one faces a danger here, far greater than that of falling into whatever chasm they're trying to jump over. Stepping back too far, we risk losing sight of our goal, or our run-up exhausts us before the jump. Of course, the size of a person's obstacle depends upon their ambitions, circumstances, and passions. So too, we each have different distance to which we must step back, just as a master archer knows how strongly to draw various distances at a target. In this sense, we must always congratulate someone for daring to jump, regardless of whether or not their leap is smaller than ours, only that they are, in fact, jumping. What a master of archery or jumping understands is that missing is a necessary consequence of their actions. As students, we must not fear broken bones, splinted shins, or disappointment. It is far better to fall into the chasm and drag one's bleeding, broken body out of it to leap again than to forever stand back. Education is just as dangerous as undertaking. Insufficient questioning and false assumptions can lead a student wildly astray. Last week while reading the Nick and McCain Ethics, I would express my concerns in this area to Mr. Lindquist. How can I be sure I'm attaining a mean? If I'm a wicked person, won't my vices appear to me as virtues? The response to these problems, he told me, is not to remain paralyzed. Instead, like an archer aiming at his mark, one must sometimes use many, many arrows before finally striking their target. So too do we students write many, many essays before actually becoming comfortable with writing. Or we must find the McLaurin series for a great deal of function before we actually have an intuitive sense of the thing. And more importantly, we must attempt to incorporate all of the things that we learn at this school into a worldview, ever refining and gathering what we do in our daily lives. How frightening this must all sound. Danger, work, bleeding, and education? Aye. But as the great archer knows, the bow is strongest when it is its most tense. So too ought we to seek out the greatest tensions in our life and use them to propel ourselves to the farthest possible shores. Some of us are just beginning to draw our bows. Strength is not full in our shoulders, resolution has not yet furrowed our brows, and our hands grip and tear from the weight of the draw. But remember, calluses will come. Some of us have already begun to fire their arrows, practicing close to home. To you I say, always fire farther than you can see. Here I believe it is important to mention the joys of placing oneself in danger, for education is holistically joyful, although it involves a great deal of pain. A great deal of aching develops in the master archer's shoulders and in his hands. He often loses friends, or at least participates in friendships with a minimized capacity, for shooting a bow seriously requires practice on one's own. The individual who jumps over a chasm separates himself from those who cannot, staying up late to pour every ounce of oneself into an essay, 3-art project, a problem set, and the study of a foreign language, often leads a student to a great number of headaches. But there is no finer sound than the thud of your arrow sticking. There is no greater satisfaction than to mock the chasm as it passes below you and to genuinely feel pride, unburdened by any false modesty in one's accomplishments. Herein lies the joy of passion, reasoned action, the explosion following philosophy. Though you might see great people suffer, great archers suffer pain, or your great fellows suffer from their studies, do not confuse the consequence with the cause. Never aspire to suffering itself, but recognize it might be a consequence of one's great deeds. For the religious virtue, do not aspire to the crucifixion, but attempt to be Christ in his finest. Always remember greatness does not come from suffering, though suffering might sometimes be a result of greatness. Here you might say, he is a Karamazovian. He contemplates both abysses at once, joy and suffering together. But I'm not talking about facing the fullness of suffering or the fullness of joy at once. I think there's a way to resolve this little problem. What we consider to be common causes of suffering will probably not actually bother us in our highest moments. Pain comes from taking ourselves too seriously and our work too lightly. Really, the best archers are attempting to remove themselves from the act of firing a bow. What I mean is that the most precise archer is nothing more than a motor on a very, very fixed frame to hold the bow. I don't mean this to separate the innate humanness of studentry or archery, but an archer who has plenty of flair or a unique style but never hits his mark would not be considered a very good one. In the same way, sometimes it's essential that we recognize we are not an end in ourselves. I think that finding the things that are more important than ourselves is essential to living a great life, and perhaps far more importantly, to dying well. So I think there's a very good answer to resolving the pains of greatness and its joy. A way to be a very good archer, jumper, student, or anything really and truly excellent. And unlike some humane letters discussions where we don't really end up with an answer, tonight I'm going to give you one. The solution to the life, universe, and everything I've been talking about is humility. And I don't mean one should not be prideful or boastful. In fact, these things are very important to one's success. If you're good at something, say that you're good at it, but then do it well. Having a proper estimation of one's soul is often in contrast to what we colloquially refer to as humility. The proper sort of humility that I'm talking to you about is a cosmic one, a humility played out on a grand scale. A great deal of suffering comes to those who think that we deserve everything, that the universe and all that we see before us has been created with the sole purpose of letting us live nice, comfortable, convenient lives. An improper sense of self-worth, thinking that my life is the only valuable thing in this world, is the source of suffering, the fear of death, and a lack of a will to greatness. And this is why Nietzsche loves the man who squanders himself. It's because he has found something worth giving up his life for. Greatness is such a monumental undertaking that none of my words could ever possibly do it justice. It is so consuming, invigorating, gargantuan, that it devours its actor. Dr. Cates once told me that when you find something worth devoting your life to, it's like meeting the person you know you are going to marry. It's shocking, it's immediate, and one just knows. So don't worry too much about finding something worth dying for, but don't assume it will find you either. Explore the pleasures of this world before you attain Olympian immortality, but never allow them to drag you away from a worthy goal. An archer would never hit his mark if he worried about tearing his rotator cuff or even worse, damaging his watch. So to you, class of 2013, I hope you think of this school as a bow, a place of tension, but not a bad sort of tension. Rather, a place where you would learn to propel yourself further into the future. And there will be a great deal of tensions ahead, but always and forever use them to shoot beyond yourself.